Good morning and good afternoon for others, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Payam Asadi, and I'm the sales manager at PRUFTECHNIK Canada. I would like to introduce today's presenter, Mr. Colin Pickett. He will be answering questions regarding the OMNITREND software. Please note that a recorded version of this webinar will be made available to you all. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the question box in your control panel. Our tech support team will answer them as we go. Some questions require lengthier answers, and we will try to get to all of them in the Q&A session at the end. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to Colin Pickett. Colin, your show, my friend.
Thank you, Payam. Let's wait for screen. Can you see my screen okay, Payam?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Okay, well, welcome to this webinar. Again, it's another free webinar from Fluke Reliability PRUFTECHNIK, and these are common questions that have been asked to PRUFTECHNIK North America tech support on the OMNITREND software. So again, welcome. And the first question is one of the simple ones, is when people do an installation of OMNITREND, they say, I need to change the settings so they have the correct settings. And this is achieved by going either into the options menu, when you can go to general settings, but there is a shortcut key on the dashboard on the top, on the first toolbar, which is this yellow wrench or spanner. Okay, we open this up, we can go here, we can look at the units, and we can change our units to suit what the user requires. So acceleration, we can change that from meters per second squared, which would be the default from installation. Length, we'd probably change that to inches because I'm in the US. And again, the useful thing about this is we can set it as active. We can also change the amount of decimal places we're going to go to. So for inches, I would always go to 4 decimal places. So that's one of the simplest things to do, is to set your settings. There are lots of settings that are in here, as you can see. You can change how the software starts, how the alarm checks work, and it goes on and on and on. And we don't have time just to go through all of these settings, there's that many. But please be aware that these settings are not affecting the data, only how you view the data. And they are usually unique to the actual computer. So if there are a multi-user version and people have it on different client PCs, each person can have their own settings. So they can have their settings set to how they want them to do that, how they want it to look. So it's a personal thing, okay? So again, that was in options, general settings, or using the shortcut key, which gets you here, and we can go straight into units and change the units that you wish to change. Easy to do. You can either double click, which changes the asterisks, or you can click on set active, which also changes the asterisks. Okay. Another question, question 2, is how do I add a manual measurement? Now, what I have here is some manual inputs that I like to see, and we like to have different ones. And I've got a manual input, which is a numerical temperature, and you can see there, we've even got an alarm on that. And then this one is a oil level, which gives us the numerical value against an alarm fix as well, okay? The way we set these up is that we need things like transducers that to be manual. So I've created a manual temperature transducer, and I will create another one here, and we go to the tools menu and we go into the transducer editor. And you can see straight away that it's jumped straight to my manual inputs. These are all the transducers that you can build and have. The checkbox means that it's available in the short list. So I'll go back down to manual inputs, and you can see some that are already here: a flow meter, an amp meter, a manometer, a resistance meter if you have one there. I've already added a manual speed reading, so I can punch in numbers to record speed after taking the data with a strobe or looking at the screen. And then I've got a manual temperature, and I use this one for adding temperatures taken with an infrared gun. So if I'm using an infrared handheld and I want to record the temperature on a motor, this is how we do it. And I'll just show you how this is done by going into the edit, and you can see that it is a manual temperature under manual inputs, and I've named it as temperature. It's a user quantity, and I gave it an F or a Fahrenheit rating, labeled it as temperature, and gave it a minimum value, the coldest thing I could ever see, and out here it can get to -50, and a maximum. And if I was checking things like ducting or anything like that that could be carrying high temperatures, I'll just put an absurd amount of maximum in there. You could put in 1,000, but if you put in 200 and something is 201, you can't record it. So you have to put in a big number. Okay, so that's an easy one to do. I'll add a new one. I get asked a lot about power. I'd like to record the power of a machine. So the one I'm going to add here is a power reading. So add power. It's not a speed reading, it's a user reading. The unit can be in percent, because is it running at 80%, 90%, whichever. The label, I can call that power. And the minimum value would be 0, because if it's 0, that means it's off. And the maximum may be that it will go over 100%, and it maybe go ridiculous, but I don't suppose it would be, but get up to 150%. When you create your sensor, always make sure that you click the checkbox. Once the checkbox is ticked, it means it is available in the shortlist and you won't have to go hunting for it. So when we come to add a power reading on there, we can do that. Okay. These ones here, the visual inputs, and this one is for oil level, is a drop-down list, and we achieve that by going into the tools menu and going to our setup manager. Okay. These are my user setups, and I have my oil level down there that I duplicated, but there is an existing one of both of these. A process parameter is my temperature set, and anything that I'm putting in as a numerical. And this is my oil level here that is predefined from all the knowledge-based setups that the PRUFTECHNIK have supplied with the software. So what I tend to do is I always create duplicates of these. So I have my own user set, and these are all my settings here. So if I wanted to do a different type of reading, and we said we'd do a power one, so I'll jump on my power one first, and I'll just duplicate that. It's very easy to name this one. I can just literally name it as power. And this just gives it so I've got something to reference. I could have used the standard reference, but I like to have that in there. When it comes to this one, however, I have a drop-down list here. And I've added a few extra bits to my drop-down list. So I know that if I go to look at the oil level, either by dipstick or by site class, I can see if it's full, if it's okay, slightly low, very low, and then refill immediately because there is a panic on that. And there are alarm levels are set on here that there's no alarm if it's full or sufficient. If it's slightly low, I get a pre-warning. So anything above 2 and above, I put an alarm level at 2, or a pre-warning level at 2, and then a warning level at 3. And very low becomes an alarm level, and refill immediately is above that, so it's an alarm level. If I duplicate that one now, I can then set this as a new task. And this one I'm going to change to be the belt condition. So if I'm looking at V belts, this is one of the common ones that we get asked about. And I go, well, these aren't going to work for me for belt conditions. So I can go, okay, well, we can edit those. I can just right click in here and change this to be that the belts are okay, so they're okay. We can have them, and I'll press return. We can have this that the belts are slipping slightly, so the slight slippage. Okay. We can change this one that they are slipping a bit more severe, so I'll just put slipping in here. Maybe they are flapping, so I gently click into there and I can go flapping. Above that, we can then say, okay, what have we got here? We can have flapping, we can even have broken or severe slippage. That's a good one. Okay, severe slippage. Okay, so we have that there. If we have severe slippage, I can add a new one, and I can then put broken belts in here as well. Or broken, and we'll say missing as well. Okay, so broken or missing. There we go. So we have that there. I don't need this one anymore because I don't need that. So then it renumbers itself, so it sorts it out. I can change them around. I could say, well, that one's more of a priority, or is that one more of a priority? I can move them around. You can even choose to use the events as a quantity, because this is a quantity test. So I can actually check here, and we can use an event list. So if you have an event list in there, you can then choose which events there are available. I click the go button, it opens up the event list, and we have set of events. Now, you have to have a good set of events. This particular database does not have all the events in there, so it says no standard events. So we won't use that one, we'll just use our selection list here. But you can build custom events as well. So I have my belt condition, I have added my manual power information that can go into there, quick save, so everything is saved. To put this into the database, I use the machinery manager, which is the third icon along. I can then add my manual tasks. Now this one has got, I've even got a manual task here that we've got a spectrum as well in there. This manual task, I'm going to add the new one, which is a new tree item. It's a measurement task here. The measurement task we're going to add is a process parameter. So it's a process parameter is what I'm going to add. Click next. It's a manual input. And the manual input can be either using the standard 120 or I actually created the power. So I've got that there labeled a little bit better. And then I've got power as a percentage. So that's what it shows me. So it now shows power. If I go back, if I want to do the visual inspection, I click on here and I can add my visual inspection that I just created. Menu, we go visual inspection, next, visual inspection, I've got my oil level. I've got my second oil level, which I created, so that's the PRUFTECHNIK one, and this is my belt condition here, so it's got more information in. Okay, and I've got that created. And obviously these will be added to the route when I download into the Vive Expert or the instrument. Okay, so that's how we do manual inputs, so we can add manual measurements. Other things that we said we can do is to add events. So events can be added at any time during the measurements, and I'll show you that if we show some of the measurements later on. Now, the most common question that we do get asked is, what's the fastest way to collect data? Well, that's quite an argumentative state because it is a personal choice again of how much data do you think you need. Now, I'm in school that I like to have to collect as minimum amount of data as possible with the maximum information that's available. So it's the shortest time to do that. We do have some options in the OMNITREND software that is useful, and one of those options is called adaptive tasks. Now, the adaptive tasks here have been set up for this position here, where I'm taking standard measurement tasks like an overall, a shock pulse, an overall acceleration. So I've got a velocity, I've got three overalls there, a velocity, a shock pulse, and an overall acceleration. If I click on the overall here, there is a tab available on this side called adaptive task. And what you can do is you can put a Spectra or any other type of task in here, which means that this now has an adaptive relationship to the first set. So this spectrum only gets checked or taken by the Vive Expert if this alarm that is set in here is breached. Now, the adaptive tasks only work where there are alarms. Okay, so if there's an alarm in here, I've made one for this upper alarm here, I can add an adaptive task. So what that means is that when the alarm is breached, the Vive Expert will then automatically take the spectrums, or in this case, the shock pulse will take the bearing, and this one will take a machine spectrum. This only really works if your alarms are good. You've got to have a good set of alarms. If you don't have a good set of alarms, then obviously you won't be taking the data that's required. But you imagine how fast it is if you only take the overall data that's required. Overall data then triggers other data. This one is the same type of setup, except for I'm then using an overall and taking a trending spectra. People ask about trending spectras all the time. Are they any better? Yes, they are. You can get a lot of information from a trending spectra. This trending spectra has been built, it's designed for 3600 RPMs or slower. Okay, it's a velocity trending spectra, it's one of my makings, and these are the tasks that it achieves. It takes the spectrum, it captures the time signal, it captures that in acceleration as well, so that's a useful way of doing it, but it delivers me the velocity overall, the ISO overall, so that's the overall for the whole spectrum or a whole time signal, of the frequency ranges that are covered, the ISO frequency ranges, and I could put alarms on this then. Velocity, a high frequency lookout, so above a certain frequency range, a kilohertz to 1.6 kilohertz, which is the Fmax, I get a calculated RMS value from acceleration. an overall 0 to peak acceleration, and even a crest factor. Now I can have up to 30 different trends in here, which is really useful. So I get 32 readings if I fill all the trends up. So the bearing envelope has got some information in there as well, so I can look at how my bearing envelope is looking for information. But these are only taken as adaptive tasks. So the alarms need to be breached before they're taken. You can have more than one adaptive task. So in this one here, I can actually put the spectrum as well. So it's taken out of this one now, it's taken out of this overall velocity and added to here. So you can have more than one. So you can set up more than one. This one is a little bit different again. This one is an adaptive spectra. Now an adaptive spectra, again, needs an alarm on it. And people say, can you put band alarms on the spectras? Yes, you can. I'll show you how to do that. There we go. I've opened up an alarm band that has been created on this spectra. It's quite straightforward. I've given it a name. I've added an alarm test setup, if you like, that I created here. I've also added a baseband. The baseband will just run and fill in the gaps where there aren't any other alarms. I've particularly put an alarm on this peak, and I have also put an alarm on this peak, as you can see here. One of them is fixed. It's an absolute alarm at 7200 RPM or CPM, which is the electrical frequency. It's also very close to 2x, because you can see there it's a little bit. So if I just zoom in, I am pinning on that one and not on 2x. So I'm saying that is an electrical frequency and the 2x was a lower frequency. Okay. I have a little peak here at the end, and I can say, okay, well, I don't want that peak to affect the alarm, so I'm going to create a new band just for this alarm band here around this area. And to do that, I click on the peak that I'm interested in, and then I add a new band. I click on the band, I can name it, and in this particular case, I will call it, let's say, high frequency. Okay, it will be downloaded to the VivExpert, okay, or the instrument. It is an absolute, but I can make it a multiple of a running speed by clicking on times, okay, but it's an absolute frequency. This is the frequency of interest. This is the width of the band that it will create, okay. The level type, now this is interesting, is an absolute, so it's fixed to the number that I have created here, which is 1 and 0.5, which has picked up a default. I can also use as an offset of a plus or minus, and I can use a percentage and say that if this band appears in other spectras, I can say I want it to be 50% bigger than the peak in the other spectra, because this can be copied and pasted using MultiEdits into other spectras, and I'll show you how to do that as well. But in this case, I'm going to keep it as a fixed absolute frequency, and I will then change this. In fact, I'll leave it as 0.75 on here. Okay, so I've just changed it a little bit. And what happens when I save it, it then redraws the band, as you can see around here. So I've now got this is not going to breach any warnings or alarms, because it could be a common interference, a gear mesh, or something that's there that you just want to trend. Okay, well, speaking of trends, this particular sets here do not have any trends attached to them, but I can trend them. I can right click on my group and I can create a trending task. So now every one of these bands is trendable. So I have now got a baseband trend, an adaptive trigger back breach there, an electrical trend and a high frequency trend. So that will show up in my results here, that when I show my spectrum, it is here. I also have the spectrum and trend view on the MultiView. I can then go through my bands and look at the trends that are available, and you can see that the data is trended. Okay, so that's a useful tool to do it. But this is an adaptive spectra. So any of these alarms that are breached on this spectra activate these adaptive tasks. So that's a really useful, is that I just take in one spectra, I have a good set of alarms on it, and if there is a breach of those alarms or warning levels, they will take adaptive tasks. They take more detailed spectras. I usually apply this, and I take a medium frequency or medium resolution spectra that captures a good set of data. And if there is a fault or an issue, I have it so it captures a good bearing envelope if I'm not already taking one. And I have it so it takes a high resolution Spectra. So I'm not always taking the high resolution Spectra, it only appears when it needs to appear. So that's one way of carrying out a faster way of collecting the data. Another way is the multitask. Now, multitasks don't show the results in the VivExpert or in the instrument that you're using, whether that's a Viv scanner or VivExpert. The multitask hides everything, so it does not display the results. So it takes the data, but it doesn't have to use the processing time of the computer to gather the information and display it on the screen. It just puts a check mark against it. And I will give an example of that in a moment when we look at the VivExpert and the data, how these different data sets work. Okay. Another way of doing it is something called near location. So these are the same standard type tasks, but near location gives us the opportunity to do two channels at the same time. And this is affected and done in the routes. So you do this and you set it up in the route. We can also use a triac sensor. Yes, a triac, so the two channel instruments is possible. It uses something similar to the near location setup, but it actually takes it as a triac sensor. So I'll show examples of that. And we have to do both of these setup types in the route. And we do that in the route editor, or the route editor for the Americans out there. And here we go, we look at the adaptive tasks. We have that route in there, we have our manual inputs, and this is the multitask. I just want to quickly show you how we look at the multitask. The multitask is loaded to the route, needs this button checking here. So when you are building your route, you check this button here, enable multitasking, otherwise the multitask doesn't work. Okay, that's that one done. That's how you set up a multitask. The near location, I'll show you how to build a near location. The near location, also loaded into my route, needs to be set up here. This is where I select any of the first positions that I want to do. So the first position is going to be my channel A, and I right click and I go near location. I click on near location and it gives me the opportunity to choose which measurement channel I want to do. So I say channel A. Then it immediately opens a box up and says, what do I want to do with the next channel? Okay, so I click on channel 2 and I click OK. And that means these two channels are now selected. So channel A and channel B means that they are in there as a near location. Now that could be the two horizontals on the machine, or it could be the horizontal and the vertical on the machine. You get the idea. You can set it up how you want, and you would continue down a route and select all the different points that you want to do. So you put them into what we call near location groups. Okay, I'll close the edit on that. Obviously, you need to save that information. The triax, again, is going to be edited. Should never edit a route when it is loaded in the VivExpert. It will not let you unload that route afterwards if you edit it like I am doing now. So the data that's in there, I will not be able to ever unload because the route has been modified and the data is now not available to me because the route code has changed because I've made a modification. This one is a triac sensor. So I've selected all my setups and now using the triac sensor. I know where I'm going to put the triac sensor. Is it going to be vertically on top of the motor or horizontally on the side? So I have to know where the Z or the Z direction is. So the Z direction is either going to be the vertical or the horizontal. In this particular case, it's the vertical. So I'm going to select triac on here. And it says, okay, what is this? Well, horizontal is going to be my X direction. And then it says, what is going to be your Y direction? Well, that's my axial. That's going to be my Y direction because we always like to take the Z direction or the Z direction last. So I select that there. And that is now my triac set. So horizontal, vertical, and axial becomes X, Z, Y. So I've now got a triac sensor built, a quick save. That's how we do that. That's set up into and put into the VivExpert. So these setups have all been downloaded already, so I can show you on the VivExpert how this would look. And I will start with the adaptive task. So you'll have to forgive me with the noise of the machine running. We set up the adaptive tasks, and we've got our graphical interlace on here. So this is the first one, which is a standard task. And we take our data, take a velocity reading. Now I've got this set so I'm manually saving and manually starting the data. So you can see how it works on here. We've got the shock pulse reading taken, and save, and then I'll go into it and take the acceleration reading. And if there was an alarm breach, which there hasn't been so far, it would then take the extra data as required. So no alarm breaches on this data, which is good. So it just takes that, it doesn't take any Spectra. The next one is the adaptive tasks with trending spectras at the back of them rather than just a standard Spectra. I'm using a trending Spectra at the back of them. So again, no problem with the shock pulse, no alarm breaches on this one. Now, if I wanted to take more data, I can actually break down the multitask. So it will break down the adaptive task and say, I want to take it. But in this case, I've got a pre-warning on there. So, oh, me pressing the button too fast. I've got a pre-warning on there. So immediately, just go back and show you that. Escape key. You can see that the velocity reading here was an adaptive. That's what this symbol means here. And it's showing you this is the result of the warning level that has been breached. So it then takes the Spectra. And this particular trending Spectra gathers me a lot of information. Gives me great information to display on the screen. I've got the time signal. I've got the max 10 at the bottom. Now, other things that we can do to make the data improvement look good on the actual Vibe Expert is that when I go and look at the data, so I can go and look at my data, I can change what is displayed on the screen. Oops, excuse me, that's me pressing the wrong button. I always make a mistake in these live webinars. It shows I'm human. Okay, so what I can do is I can pause the data. We talked about events. We can add events. We can add comments. This is where we add them there. I can go in here, use the 3 dots. That opens up more information, and I can change the display setup. And I change it to one of my favorite ones for using trending spectras, which is to show trending bars. You can see here, we can say what it is. The max 10 is the default. I can keep the time waveform as the default. I can have any alarms as a default. I can have the frequency markers as a default. If you've loaded those informations in, like alarms and frequency markers, they will appear. If you've got trending values, I'll show you that one. We'll set that so it displays the trending values, and it shows me using the F key. I can jump down to the bottom and I can go up and down and have a look at my trending values. Okay, but as I said before, I like to actually have my favorite one on there, which is the trending bars. So if there are any alarms set to the trends, we have that there, and we get these trending bars, which is a quick reference to show you how fast and how good the data can be. You can see that if any alarms were breached. And again, I've taken this reading twice, so I can either overwrite the original or append it. So the offer is always there to do that information. Okay, this is the adaptive Spectra. So it takes a spectrum reading. It takes one spectrum, and if any of the alarms are breached, which they should be, we'll see when it comes up, it should flag up a warning level alarm. Okay, there it is, a warning level alarm on there, and I save that data. It will then automatically take 2 extra spectrums. This is a really useful tool, so you're not day in, day out collecting data where you're taking lots and lots of time waveforms and lots of data. You can set up adaptive tasks to only take extra special readings or high resolution readings when you need to. Okay, so when you are taking the alarms. So that's how we do that. The triac setup, as you saw. Okay, let's just move on from that. I'll show you the near location next. So that route was finished. We also have the triacs in there. So I says we'll do the near location. Near location does the same thing, but it uses the 2 channels at the same time. So you can see on here, both channels are here, and it actually marks out A, position 1, B, position 2. And you need to have 2 sensors connected, of course. As long as you've set them up correctly and you've got the right sensors plugged in, 6142, in this case, it's going to do the A-B measurements and take the data one after the other. Okay. It's set to do this in the fastest way possible. So sometimes it may take shock pulse and velocity readings, or acceleration and velocity readings. So in that case, it was not a shock pulse and an acceleration. I haven't got them doing synchronous data. I would turn off all my settings in the Vive Expert itself to make it do synchronous and rather than optimizing the data like I showed you in the last webinar. So this just does it a little bit quicker. So this time we've got a spectrum at the top and a shot pulse at the bottom. This is using the best way of using the 2 channels as the Viv expert sees it. Okay, so automatically saving as well after time, moving on to the next point. All of these little things help you out. So I'm just going to stop that because you get the idea of how that works. So we'll escape back, we'll close that machine down, and then we'll look at our other routes. Hopefully we will. Just waiting for the Vive expert. There we go. Okay. So the other one was multitask. Now the multitask one is one where you do not see the results. So you get this symbol that appears and saying it's in a multitask. It's telling you it's using the 614 channel, 2 channel, and we're off away with our setup. And it tells you the setups here. Now this is quite useful. The tasks are listed. It takes the data. It also tells you when you're allowed to move the sensor. And that may be before you think it's processed all the data. And that's just there to do how much data you're collecting and how long the processing time is. So data acquisition is finished, sensor can be moved to the next measurement point, even though it's still actually processing the spectras in the background. And there it is saved and moved, and the route is completed. So that was the simplest one. The next one, a little bit more tricky. We need the triac sensor plugged in. So I just swap that over now and make sure I get them in the right way around. So I'm plugging in my triac sensor. Now the triac sensor is available as a purchase by PRUFTECHNIK. It's actually the cable that's very expensive because it's a special logic cable, so it knows what it's doing. So the triac sensor is a nice upgrade to use, and we can use this. And you can see here that all 3 are being flashed at the same time. So all 3 positions on there are available, and it says that it's the outboard bearing number 1 non-driving is horizontal, axial, and vertical in that order for the X, Y, and Z readings. So it takes the 2 readings like it did with the near location. So we get them simultaneously or synchronously in this case, or as best that the Viv expert can do, it's as it sees fit. As soon as it's collected, we save that data, it moves on. Next task, which is the overalls, we collect that data. We get the 2 different readings. We have a warning or alarm, and if again you could have multitasking in adaptive tasking in there, and then you can see that it moves over to the vertical and it takes the vertical reading on its own, which is the closest to the bearing, which is the direction the sensor is pointing, which is the best way you get the bearing data. So you may want to add different tasks there just on that one position. So that one location can have extra tasks, but that are bearing related. And that's how the fastest way to collect the data appears. We like to have this set up only when you've got good data and your alarms are good and you know what you're doing. Everybody needs to be able to work the software correctly, and that's one of our setups that we do like to have, which is the triac sensor. There are some limitations to triac sensors. Everybody has their personals that they know about, and you know, frequency ranges are not as good or not as high. Sometimes the enveloping is not as high, especially when you're comparing it to the PRUFTECHNIK 6.142 sensor, which has one of the biggest frequency ranges of any sensor I'm aware of. Okay. So that's our data taken there. The manual inputs that we created, here's what they would look like. We have a manual input here. It is just asking me for a numerical value. And again, if I put in a number that is quite high, we can get an alarm trigger on there. And this particular one actually has an alarm trigger as an adaptive task that it then takes a Spectra, which is a useful thing to do again, that you may only want to take Spectra on a particular machine when it's at a certain power or in a certain frequency range if you're looking at certain things. So you can punch in the number, then it takes the Spectra, or even, you know, for different speed ratios and things like that. People have used that in the past and how they set their setups. This is the visual inspection, which is our oil level. So it's asking me now what the sight glass looks like. Is it very low? Is it refill immediately? If I say it's low, that would give me a warning level. So it comes up as a warning level on any of the reports and in the database. So we have the warnings there. Okay. Let me go back to our OMNITREND software. So finished with the grinding rig, so we can get rid of that noise. Another thing about the software that not many people know is how to switch between windows. If you hit the window key, you can see that these are the windows that are open. So I can go into the look at the Spectra here, and we look at that one, or I can go and look at the machinery manager. And I can do that two ways, using the window key to activate the windows. I can even change how I look at them. I can cascade them. I can make them horizontal. We've got a large monitor. You can cascade them and set them up so you can see multiple screens on the same screen by tiling them in certain ways, horizontally or vertically. But the way I like to flick between them is using the control tab. Using the control tab shortcut key gets me between my screens quite quickly, which is another way of looking at the data in a way, a setup. I said I'd show you how to adjust alarms. I showed you one about the trending alarms that we can set up in our Spectras and things like that. So any Spectra that you take, you can look at an alarm. You can add an alarm to a Spectra. We click on the point that we want to wrap an alarm around, and people have used this to do the technical associates band alarms and set them up, and you can move them quite easily between machines, as I will show now. I'll quickly make a new group. I can name it up here and put my own name in. I can name the group. I'm just going to put this one band alarm on here and set it to this particular setup. I'm going to make it, it's a time, so it changes if the speed changes, it moves up and down with that. It does download to the instrument, and I'll just give it an alarm level 2, and I'll make a warning level of 1. Make a warning level of 1. I save that data on there, and there's the band drawn around there. The baseband fills in the data that's left. So I can create a baseband. I've just got to give it an alarm level for the baseband. It's always at the top. So I don't want the alarm level on the baseband to be the same, so I'll make that 1, and I'll make that 0.5, say. There we go. Oh, missed on that, so I'll try that again, 0.5, press return, there we are. Save that, and there's my baseband done. I can make it trendable, create a trending task. There we go, there, we've got our trending data. Now, to move this band, which is still called default, and put it on another Spectra of the same type. Okay, I need to have a Spectra of the same type, which I don't. I have one here, which is unfortunately has already got a band alarm on there. Do I have one anywhere else? Yes, I do. I have it there. I can use MultiEdit to do that. Okay, so I turn on MultiEdit. I select my other Spectra, and I say there's no band alarm here. I go back to my band alarm here, and as long as I highlight it and make it the proper color of highlighted, so it's blue, I can then apply to other locations. And you can see straight away that that band alarm has now moved to there. So MultiEdit is a really useful tool. You can delete with MultiEdit, so please be careful that you've got everything selected correctly. I can add to the whole database, and it will put this band alarm everywhere that this setup is the same, which is again good and also bad. So you have to be careful of what you do have selected with MultiEdit. Okay, so I've turned off MultiEdit, we're back to our normal setups. So that's how we do alarms. Overall alarms are even simpler. I mean, we've done the overall alarms for manual input. They're very, very simple. We've created our belt condition here. We didn't put the alarms on, but we know what sorts of numbers we need to do, and it's just the same principle here. We just add an alarm for an overall. We want the alarm to be above 4, the warning to be above 3, and the pre-warning to be above 2. So we set that as there it is, and there's our alarms. Now we don't have any data on here, but we know from our setup that we provided that when we set up our alarm oil on the oil level, we have the same similar setup here. We can see how that works, and there is some data there to say there is a data point. Okay, that's how we set up our alarms. We can do that to any overall value, so any overall simple numeric value that is created. Temperatures, power. Do I want it to alarm if I'm creating something that's over 100%? So what would the alarm be? It's in percent. If it's over 100%, it should be in an alarm state. Okay, so that's all I do is save that, and I just have that one alarm. Anything else doesn't matter. simple alarms. Okay, so that's configuring alarms. There are lots of different options, and most of these are available as tutorial videos in the help files in OMNITREND software itself. So how to set that band alarm is one that we get asked how to do that quite often, and I always teach my classes and show them how to get to it in the help files. We open the help file up, we go to the contents, we go to the tutorials, and there is how to create a band alarm as a tutorial video. Okay, so close the help file. So easy to find that if you need that information. Okay, customizing the views. When we're actually viewing the data, and if I use my tab key, I can switch to the data, we have lots of ways to do views of the data. I've set up some views on here already that I have on some of my setups. So when I look at the sandbox, no data. When I look at my webinar location, no data. I look at my adaptive task, no data. Multitask, no data. I can go down these and you can see, oh, this one has data. This is what we got as called multi-views. I've got some multi-view groups here. I can change what I see in my multi-views. Okay. I can create a multi-view at different levels. In this particular case, everywhere you see a blank where it says no data available, going down to hit the position level even, no data available. When you get to the task, you get the standard data. When you're looking at trend inspectors and you get to the task, you get a built-in multi-view that automatically appears with all the different trends and availability that you can do. So you've got that information there and you can quickly go through it. But at the level above, you can create your own multi-views. I've got one here that just shows the spectras that are in the task of the position. And we do that in Machinery Manager. So again, quick flick back to Machinery Manager. I can go to my setups here and I can look at my multi-views. So if I want to look at a multi-view of a position, we click on multi-view and here's the tabs that I created. And it is a case of just dragging and dropping. The information that I have taken is all available here. I've collected the overalls here. I've got all of those in here. If I go to the machine level, I've added a crest factor to show me all the crest factors, but I'll show you how to make a spectral group. So I can add the velocity spectras here. So I'm going to create a new group. So add a new group. That's what I did here, create a new group. And now I can go and fetch all the velocity spectras from wherever I want. So in this particular case, let's just do the pulley end. I'll pull that spectrum in. I can pull that spectrum in. I can go and get that spectrum, and I can go and get that spectrum. Just as an example, that's what I've created. Obviously, that is all done. Again, these are useful because you can use multi-edit to move them from one position to another position. So I can apply them to all positions on the database if I wish. So everywhere there is a view, it doesn't show this particular data, it just shows you the path of any data available under that location set. So that's the way it works. It's very, very good and very intuitive to do that. So if I quickly go back to my machine set now and I refresh my screen, I may have to actually reopen. I think I do. I think I'll have to, oh no, I was on the fan, wasn't I? So I'll go down to the fan setup, look at the machine. I've got my velocity spectra sets there that are, I've just created my velocity spectra specs there. So that's good. Of course, analyzing the data and looking at the data, a quick way of getting around it is things like linking the graphs together. So we can link the graphs so they're all linked at the same frequency. When I move my cursor on one, it moves on the other. If they're identical graphs, these aren't because there's an acceleration graph involved in there, but they would move together and show me the same data. So I can actually close individual graphs, so I can click on that graph and close that graph. So now I have two graphs together. They are linked together. So when I put cursors on or frequency markers or anything else on there, they appear. Okay. Frequency markers are really important. If you're looking at bearing information, like on the bearing envelope here, we need to know if the frequency markers for the bearing are available and are visible. Here I have one here that was set. I can see that there are no bearing frequency markers available at that point on the motor, but on the fan, I have some frequency markers here. So let's get there. We get to a point. We look at this point here. The frequency markers appear along the side here when we're looking at a spectra. And we can put the frequency markers on as soon as I've got a spectra on the screen. There we go. We get that right. Here they are here. And they're also available on the tab on the side here. So we can go into find the frequency markers if there are available. This one has got a bearing frequency marker on there. So I can put the outer race bearing frequency marker on. And if it lines up and there's some issue there and the amplitudes are high, I know I've got an outer race issue or the inner race issue, the 2 times ball spin frequency or the cage frequency. They're all available to me there. Turn them on and off quickly at this point here. Okay, how we add the frequency markers, again, Machinery Manager. So we can flick between the 2 points and we go back to Machinery Manager. And frequency markers can be added at the machine level or the position level. So I added these particular bearings at the machine level. Now this bearing, the pulley end bearing, is different to the impeller end bearing. So I can add bearings like that. Now the motor doesn't have any, but again, most motors would have 2 different types of bearing. So if I use the MultiEdits and select my 3 bearing points, the outboard bearing here, so I've got horizontal, vertical and axial, then I can add a bearing frequency set. So it's click on add under frequency markers, open up a bearing frequency set. You can have lots of different manufacturers in here. They're all available on the CD. We can supply them if you don't have them. Okay, I'm just going to randomly check a bearing and add that to that bearing, and then it will apply it to wherever the task's added. Turn the task off, go to the outboard bearing, or the inboard bearing, sorry, turn those ones on, add a different bearing. I'll grab a different bearing and put that there. So I now have different bearings on there on all 3 positions. So we got that set. So that's how we add frequency markers. Very useful tool to help us analyze the data. Getting around the database when we're looking at the data, turn off multi-edit. As I said, it can be dangerous. The view setups that we have, these multi-views, really useful. I like to have my own custom multi-views. That's my personal choice. I build them how I see fit. I put them at the train level, put them at the machine level. I also put them at the point level, and they're easy to copy and apply to the whole of the database in one go if you need to. Once you've built one set and you're happy with it, you can apply it and put that across the whole database. Now I know we're running out of time, but the other quick way of getting around the database is to use the Navigator. This little button here opens up the Navigator and it allows you to flick between things very easily. I can go the same. So if I click the same, it gives me the same graph on the right-hand side. The same. And the next thing that we get asked about is quick reports. How do I do quick reports? Well, luckily, we've applied a copy to clipboard. So there's a copy to clipboard button for anything that's on the right-hand side of the screen. So these 2 graphs, if I copy to clipboard, will immediately be copied to the clipboard and can be pasted into an email, Word documents, or so forth. Next to the copy to clipboard is copy to file. This copies things to a folder, so you can save it as a JPEG on your computer hard drive. And there's a handsome chap, isn't he? So we can save that in any file we want. But my favorite one, and my one that I do like the most, is this one, which is the quick graph report. Runs up a quick graph report. You can add your own logo. Got the company name in there, so I'll make this a little bit bigger. And where I put the cursor information has appeared on the bottom as well. I also get the max 10 when I have 1 graph on there, which is also, again, useful information. And there is a big space here, and people say, well, how do I add comments to this? Well, you can't save this as a document unless you print to PDF. That's the one way. But to get a comment on there, we use this comment box that's on the end of this little tab here, on this little window that can be adjusted. We can adjust that out. And this is how we do it. We type in here our comments of anything that we want to write. Okay. And that comment there will appear in the report when we run the graph report, and it appears in there. So you can actually do quite a nice little setup. And I can't spell today. I'm having a little all over with the spelling. So anything can be put in there, you know, proper description, this has got a bearing fault, and that's how we do that. And we add their comments on there. Okay, so that covers most of the things. I think our webinar is coming to a close. If we've got any questions that have come in, I'll talk with John now, and hopefully John will have some questions regarding OMNITREND software.
Yeah, Colin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, John.
Good. Hope everyone else can too. I've been trying to answer questions as they come in, but I saved a few for you to answer, Colin.
Okay.
Since we've got about 10 minutes, I got maybe 2 or 3 questions for you. First one is, what is the best way to increase storage in the database? Because I understand there's only a 2 GB limit. So how do I administrate larger databases?
Okay, that's true. Microsoft Access, which is the common database that comes with the PRUFTECHNIK OMNITREND software, it's limited to 2 GB, and it's not an OMNITREND limited to access limit by Microsoft. So the only other way of getting that is that you could have multiple databases. There's not a problem with that. You own the database, you own the software, you can make as many databases as you like. But the proper way of doing that is obviously to move across to an SQL server, which is virtually unlimited. It's as big as most servers can be. So you go across to SQL, and to do that, you need to buy a license, and you may even want to buy multi-user licenses and things like that. But you can easily turn an Access database into an SQL database, and then OMNITREND needs a special software password to log into looking at a SQL database. Okay.
Perfect.
Next
question. This is actually your favorite question. Sorry, you might hear my dog screaming in the background. What do you mean by shock pulse? So maybe you could give us a few more sentences on what shock pulse is.
Yeah, we covered shock pulse on the setups when we were looking at the VivExpert on the last webinar. Shock pulse is an ultrasonic check that the PRUFTECHNIK sensor can carry out. It's measured at 36 kilohertz, which is well in the ultrasonic frequency. And what we've got is the background noise in the bearing, this pink line here, we call that the carpet value, okay? So this number here, and this is a special number. And then we have the maximum number heard, which is this one here at the top, okay? So the maximum number is the peaks that are causing the shocks that are in the bearing, so any damage in the bearing. And what we're looking for is a gap of around 10 decibels. The bottom one is affected by lubrication, so if it's a good lubrication, then the shock pulse gap, the line will be fairly good and it won't change much. When there is damage, this gap gets really, really big really quickly. So we see early signs of bearing damage at the ultrasonic frequencies. So shock pulse is in there. You can actually take shock pulse spectras as well, that the software is available to do. This is one of them here. This shows very, very high resolution, if you like, damage that's happening in the bearing at 36 kilohertz. So this is a shock pulse spectrum as well. Okay. Okay, next question then, John.
Very good. This one is about reporting. How can I pull a report indicating which assets have been measured in a given month and bad actors based on ISO alarms?
Well, the ISO alarms need to be put into the database in some form. So this has got ISO alarms in this overall velocity. When you create the task, it asks you about ISOs. Do you want to add alarms? But to get data out of the database, the quickest way is actually to use OMNITREND Web Reports. And we go to the Tools menu, Reports, and we go to OMNITREND Web. Now, there are a set of standard reports that appear with OMNITREND Web, and there's lots of information here, including compliance reports for last monitored equipment. So if that's what the customer's after, if he wants just a value report, we can do that. You can get all different ones from the last measurement survey carried out, deviation reports. There's a set of standards. If you have the license for this software, which is usually free with a VivExpert, from 2015 onwards, it became free. If you don't, you have to buy it. We can supply that. You then can customize these reports to have your logos in and your types of reports. But this is a training program all on its own because it's a very, very good reporting system. Okay, next question.
All right, we've only got a few more minutes and I just got a bunch of questions all at once here.
That's what usually happens, yeah.
How do you create a spectrum plus time signal plus trending bands in one measurement?
Right, this is the trending spectra that we talked about. The trending spectra is this one here. Yeah. We can create those using the template editor. We go into the template editor, and these are all of my trending spectras, and they are types of templates. So to create a new one, we click on Add New. I click on Trending Spectra. I have to give it a name, and this particular one I'll just put test in there, but I would be a lot more precise about this. And then it asks you a question. It asks you which sensor do you want to use it for. So if I was going to use one of these trending spectras that are based on an ICP sensor, I would select the correct sensor here. So for one for the triax, which is the ICP sensor, that's an ICP sensor as well. So I have to select the sensor. Then I have to select which setup am I going to use. Now, I always have custom setups. I build my own. So there's always a 4-digit number that I would use. So I've got a high resolution spectrum here. That gives me the setup that I would want, and then I create the monitoring setups in here. Now, I won't go into all the ins and outs of it. I'll quickly make one here. We'll go to crest factor in acceleration. So I'll choose acceleration, or what type of setup would it be? Crest factor. I'll give it a quick name. I'll just type crest in there. And I can put an alarm set on there. It looks at the frequency range of your spectra, so you can actually look at bands as well, and you can do that by going to orders. So I can look at order based. Here I will put an alarm in, crest factor alarm of 10, and I'll usually the standard one for 8. And maybe we'll go in there for 6 as a start. So I've created one with an alarm band in there. Save it on that side. There is a whole video, again, in the help files on how to build the trending spectrums, okay? So, because we don't have time to do all of this here, but most of the common ones that I like to use are order-based. So this is a sample of an order-based one. So it's got very similar to technical associates, what the orders are. I haven't put any alarms in there, but you can. I tend to put my alarms in differently. I put them on the spectrum, put them on the bands individually to the machine. That's my personal choice. I can do that here as well. I can add alarms in here. You can build this and include other multi-views as well. So there is a default multi-view, but you can include other multi-views. Okay, so that's how we do that. Now, obviously, we're coming to the end of our hour of webinar. It's been a pleasure to show people around OmniTrend software again and answer some of the questions. The ones we didn't get to, well, one of the common ones that we didn't get to is, why are my readings changed so they are now 5 times higher? Well, that's one that happens a lot when people use the wrong sensor. You have to make sure you use a 6.142 sensor with the PRUFTECHNIK Viv Expert. If you use a 6.147, it amplifies them all by a factor of 5. That's a common one that we got into tech support. But there obviously are going to be a lot more questions that we will answer as we can, and we'll get back to every question that we can, and everybody on the webinar will get an answer list. So I hope that's been informative to you guys. I'll hand this back over to Payam.
Yes, thank
you guys.
Thank you very much, Colin. Thank you, Colin. We got a lot of people asking if these webinars are recorded, and yes, they're going to be recorded, and we will send you send all the attendees an email with the links as well. We want to thank everybody for joining. We appreciate you being here. Give me 1 second. Hold on. Let's put this here. So we will send a complete, as Colin mentioned, we'll send a complete document of all the questions and answers to all of you. However, if you still have any unanswered questions, please reach out to your local representative or send us an email to support.na@pruftechnik.com. We want to thank everybody again for joining, and we'll see you next time for the next webinar. Have a great day. Thank you again.
Yeah, stay safe, everyone.